It was a rainy Saturday afternoon, and Jake and Lily were stuck inside. They had already played every game in the house and watched all their favorite movies. Bored, they decided to explore the attic of Lily's grandmother's house. It was full of old, dusty boxes and forgotten treasures from years gone by. "Wow, look at all this stuff," Jake said, his voice echoing through the attic. He was holding up an old toy airplane. Lily, always the curious one, was digging through an old wooden chest. "Hey, Jake, check this out," she called. She had pulled out a small, golden pocket watch. It looked very old, with strange markings on its surface. "What do you think it means? Maybe it's some sort of riddle," Lily suggested. "Let's open it." As Lily clicked the button on the side, the watch began to glow. The room seemed to spin around them, and they both felt dizzy. Before they knew it, everything went dark. When they opened their eyes again, they were no longer in the attic. The rain was gone, and instead of the old house, they were standing in the middle of a busy village. People were dressed in old-fashioned clothes, and there were carts on the streets selling food and goods. The air smelled different, fresh and earthy. "Where are we?" Jake whispered, his voice filled with confusion. Lily looked around. "Wide-eyed, I don't know. This doesn't look like Grandma's house. This looks old." Suddenly, a man wearing a brown coat walked up to them. "Hello there, can I help you?" he asked with a smile. Jake and Lily looked at each other. They didn't recognize the language or the place, but they both felt one thing for sure: they were in a completely different time. The man in the brown coat looked at Jake and Lily with curiosity. He seemed kind, but also a bit confused by their blank stares. "Are you lost?" he asked gently. "You don't seem familiar with the village." Lily shook her head, still in disbelief. "I think we're in the wrong place," she muttered. Jake looked around at the people and buildings, trying to make sense of what was happening. The houses were made of wood, and the streets were cobblestone. There were no cars or modern technology, just horses pulling carts, and people walking around in long coats and dresses. It was like stepping back in time. "I've never seen anything like this," Jake said, his voice low. "Where are we?" The man smiled kindly and pointed to a nearby building. "This is the village of Mayfield, in England. You must have come from far away." He paused and looked at their clothes. "But you're dressed strangely. Are you travelers from the city?" Lily blinked, her mind racing. "The city, but we didn't come from any city. We were just in my grandmother's attic double quotes. Ah, I see. Well, no matter," the man said, brushing it off. "My name is Mr. Thomas. I'm the blacksmith here. Welcome to the village." He extended his hand, and they shook it, both still unsure of what was going on. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas," Lily said politely, though she was still trying to make sense of everything. Mr. Thomas smiled. "No need to thank me. It's my pleasure. You two must be in need of some guidance. It's not often we get visitors from afar." Jake and Lily exchanged nervous glances. They didn't know how to explain that they had traveled through time, so they just nodded. Mr. Thomas tilted his head, noticing their confusion. "You seem puzzled. Don't worry. If you need anything, just ask." This village is a good place for strangers. As they walked through the village with Mr. Thomas, Lily started to notice some words and phrases that sounded familiar. "Excuse me," she whispered to Jake. "I think I understood him when he said don't worry and ask. It's like the English we've been learning at school." Jake's face lit up. "Wait, you're right. This is English. It's just old-fashioned." Mr. Thomas continued walking, leading them down the street. "Let me show you around. Young ones, this village has much to offer." He pointed to the blacksmith shop, the bakery, and the market. "We are a close-knit community, and we all know each other here." Lily looked at Jake with excitement. "This is amazing. We're actually here, in the past," she whispered, almost as if in disbelief. But Jake's thoughts were already racing ahead. "We need to figure out how to get back home. And we need to learn more about this place and this language." As they walked with Mr. Thomas, the mystery of the watch, the strange markings, and the journey through time weighed heavily on their minds. They couldn't shake the feeling that this adventure was just beginning. As they continued walking with Mr. Thomas, the village began to feel more and more familiar to Lily. The small houses, the market stalls, and the people's way of life seemed simple, yet full of history. She couldn't help but feel a bit excited, though part of her still wondered how they had ended up here. Mr. Thomas led them to the village square, where a group of children were playing with wooden toys. They greeted him with smiles, and he waved back, making a comment about the weather. "Is it always this calm here?" Jake asked, looking around. "It feels like time has stopped," Mr. Thomas chuckled. "Life is slow in Mayfield. We don't get many visitors, so it's always quiet. We enjoy the peace here." Lily smiled, but her mind was still spinning. "This doesn't feel like a dream." "But how did we get here?" she whispered to herself. "Did you hear that, Jake?" Lily asked, trying to focus. "I think he just said we enjoy the peace here. That's English. But it sounds ... old. Jake nodded, looking puzzled. "It does sound a bit different. I think it's from a long time ago." They kept walking, passing by the town's church and the bakery, where the smell of fresh bread filled the air. As they walked, they tried to understand more of the language. Although they knew the basics from their English lessons, it was harder to follow the old-fashioned words and phrases. Jake felt overwhelmed. "I can't understand everything he's saying. It's like it's English, but ... it's different." Mr. Thomas smiled knowingly. "I see you're struggling a little with the words." "Don't worry, it's common for people from the future to find our speech a bit hard to understand." Lily looked at him with wide eyes. "Wait, how did you know that?" Mr. Thomas chuckled again. "Oh, I've heard tales of travelers from the future. They often have trouble with our language. But don't worry, you'll get used to it." He stopped walking and turned to them. "There are some important words and phrases in our time that you may need to learn. For example, when you meet someone, you can say good day instead of just hi. And when you need something, you should say could you please ... single quotes instead of just can I. It's a matter of respect here." Lily and Jake exchanged a glance. "Good day," Jake repeated slowly, trying to mimic the sound. "Could you please," Lily added, focusing on the polite tone. "You've got it," Mr. Thomas said with a smile. "With practice, you'll speak like a true Mayfield local in no time." As they continued through the village, Lily and Jake felt more confident in their ability to understand and speak the old-fashioned English. But they knew they needed to learn even more if they were going to communicate with the people and, hopefully, find a way back home. Their adventure in the past had only just begun. The next day, Jake and Lily were sitting at a small wooden table in the village tavern, talking quietly. They had spent the morning exploring Mayfield with Mr. Thomas, who had shown them how people greeted each other, how they spoke, and some of the important phrases they would need to understand. But as the day wore on, they began to realize just how much they still had to learn. Lily sighed, looking at the small piece of paper where she had written down a few words and phrases. "I feel like I'm learning a new language. It's still hard to understand everything." Jake nodded, tapping his pen on the table. "I know what you mean. It's like we're speaking English, but it's all mixed up with old words and phrases." Just then, a man approached their table. He was dressed in a long coat with a large hat, looking serious but friendly. "I overheard you talking about our language," he said with a slight smile. "I am Edward, the town scholar. If you're willing, I could help you with your studies." Lily's eyes widened. "A scholar, that sounds perfect. We really need help understanding this old English." Edward chuckled. "It's my pleasure. You see, the English you're hearing now is very different from the one you may be familiar with. We use a lot of formal words and expressions. For example, instead of saying how are you, we say how doth thee do. It may sound strange to you, but it's how we communicate here." Jake looked at Lily, then back at Edward. "Wait, you say how doth thee do, but that sounds like something from a history book." Edward smiled warmly. "Indeed, it does. But it's the way we speak here in Mayfield, and I promise, with time, you'll get used to it." Lily nodded eagerly. Can you teach us more? We want to be able to speak like you. Edward took a seat at the table, pulling out a small leather-bound book. I'll start with a few key phrases, he said, flipping through the pages. When you want to ask someone for help, you would say, could they assist me? Instead of can you help me, Jake and Lily repeated after him. Could they assist me? They said together, trying to get the pronunciation right. Edward smiled at their effort. Very good. Now, let's try another one. Instead of saying I don't know, you would say I know not. It's just a different way of using words. I know not, Lily said slowly, focusing on the words. Exactly, Edward said, you're learning quickly. Soon, you'll be able to have a conversation with anyone in the village. As the lesson continued, Jake and Lily began to feel more confident. They practiced simple phrases like good day, could they assist me, and I know not. They stumbled a few times, but Edward was patient, always encouraging them to try again. By the end of the lesson, Jake and Lily had learned a lot of new vocabulary and phrases. Though it was still a challenge, they felt more prepared to speak the language of the past. As they left the tavern, Edward waved goodbye. Remember, practice makes perfect. Keep using these words, and soon they will feel like second nature. Jake looked at Lily with a smile. I think we're getting the hang of this. We just have to keep practicing. Lily nodded. Yeah, we'll figure it out. And hopefully, we'll find a way back home too. But as they walked down the cobblestone streets, they couldn't shake the feeling that there was still much more to learn about the past, and about the mysterious watch that had brought them here. A few days had passed since Jake and Lily started their language lessons with Edward. They had learned many new phrases and words, and each day they felt a little more comfortable speaking in the Old English of Mayfield. But something was still bothering them, something they couldn't quite explain. It was late in the evening, and the two of them were sitting by the fire in the small cottage Mr. Thomas had lent them. The warm glow of the flames flickered against the walls, casting dancing shadows across the room. Jake stared at the mysterious watch, which they had placed carefully on the table. Do you think this watch has anything to do with how we ended up here? He asked, his voice full of curiosity. Lily picked up the watch and examined it closely. I don't know. It doesn't look like anything special, but it feels powerful, you know. Suddenly, the watch began to glow faintly. Both Jake and Lily jumped back in surprise. Did you see that? Lily whispered. It moved. Just like the first time we used it. Jake was wide-eyed. It's like it's calling us for something. Lily placed the watch back on the table, but the glowing continued, growing brighter with each passing second. What do you think it means? She asked, her voice trembling slightly with excitement and fear. Before Jake could answer, the watch made a soft, almost imperceptible clicking sound. The two of them exchanged glances, knowing that something was about to happen. They had no idea what, but they had learned to trust their instincts. Let's touch it, Jake said. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do. Lily hesitated for a moment before reaching out and touching the watch with her fingertips. The second she made contact, the room around them began to shimmer and twist, as if reality itself was bending. What's happening? Jake shouted, but his words were drowned out by a loud, whooshing sound. The walls seemed to fade away, and the air grew thick with the feeling of movement. It was as if they were being pulled through time itself. In the blink of an eye, the room was gone, and they were no longer in the cottage. Instead, they found themselves standing in a completely different place. Lily gasped as she looked around. Where are we? The sky was a strange shade of orange, and the ground was covered with strange plants that they had never seen before. It looked like they were in the middle of a vast Sahara desert. This isn't Mayfield, Jake said, his voice filled with awe. Where did the village go? Lily could feel her heart racing. This is different. I don't recognize this place at all. What happened to the watch? Why did it bring us here? As they stood there, taking in their new surroundings, a voice suddenly called out from behind them. Welcome to the future. They turned quickly to see a tall woman in a futuristic outfit walking toward them. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and she had a strange device strapped to her wrist that looked like a small computer. Who are you? Jake stammered. The woman smiled warmly. My name is Dr. Valerie, and I believe you to have just arrived from the past. Am I right? Lily's eyes widened in shock. How did you know? Dr. Valerie laughed softly. I've been watching the time travel experiments for years. You're not the first to come through, and you won't be the last. Jake and Lily exchanged a confused glance. They had expected to be in another part of the past, not the future. But the woman's words confirmed it somehow. The watch had sent them not just to another time, but to a different era altogether. How do you know we're from the past? Lily asked, still trying to make sense of it all. Dr. Valerie looked at them, her expression kind but serious. I can tell by your clothes, your language and, of course, your confusion. You don't belong here, do you? Jake looked down at his clothes, realizing that they were still wearing the same simple outfits they had worn back in Mayfield. They didn't look at all like the futuristic clothing the woman was wearing. No, we don't, Jake admitted. But how do we get back? And why did the watch bring us here? Dr. Valerie's smile faded slightly. The watch is a key to different times. It's a powerful artifact, and it's not always easy to control. But don't worry, I can help you. She paused, studying them carefully. You're going to need to learn a lot more than just old-fashioned English to get back home. But for now, let's get you settled and start figuring out how to send you back. Lily and Jake followed Dr. Valerie as she led them toward a tall building in the distance. They were both still in shock from the sudden shift in time, but they knew one thing for sure: they were about to begin a whole new chapter of their time-traveling adventure. The towering building Dr. Valerie had led them to was like nothing Jake and Lily had ever seen before. It was made of sleek, shining material that reflected the orange sky above, and its walls seemed to pulse with a faint glow. They entered the building, and it felt as though they had stepped into a completely new world. Inside, the technology was advanced, and everything seemed to be moving effortlessly. People walked by, speaking in a language that sounded a little like English, but was much more complex. Screens floated in the air, displaying information in holographic forms. This is incredible, Jake whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. I've never seen anything like this before. Lily nodded, equally fascinated. How is all of this possible? We were just in Mayfield, and now we single quotes here, doctor. Valerie smiled as she led them to a small room at the end of the corridor. It was filled with large, complex machines and glowing devices. The room had a strange hum of energy. You're in the future now, Dr. Valerie said. But this is just the beginning of your adventure. The watch you have is not just a time travel device, it's also a language learning tool. It connects you to different eras, helping you understand not only how people speak, but how they think, how they live. Jake looked at the watch on his wrist, realizing just how much more it could do. He'd never imagined that the simple watch they had found could hold so much power. So how do we get back? Lily asked. She could hear the urgency in her own voice. As much as she wanted to continue learning about this new world, she missed her family, her home. She wanted to go back. Dr. Valerie nodded knowingly. I understand. You'll need to use the watch again to return home, but it won't be easy. The watch is attuned to your time and place, but it's also unpredictable. It can bring you to unexpected places, and sometimes it's difficult to control. Jake felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. But if we don't figure it out, will we be stuck here forever? Dr. Valerie placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. No, you won't be. But you will have to learn more about the future and how language has evolved. Once you understand the changes, you'll be able to activate the watch to take you back to Mayfield. Trust me, I've helped many others before. Lily's eyes widened. So we can learn more about how language works through different times. Dr. Valerie smiled again. Exactly, and the best part is, you're not alone. You'll have each other to help with the learning process. The room was quiet for a moment as Jake and Lily absorbed the gravity of what they had just learned. They were part of something bigger now, something that spanned across time and language. So, how do we begin? Jake asked. Ready for the next step in their journey, Dr. Valerie motioned to a console in the corner of the room. First, I want you to practice speaking in this future language. It might seem confusing at first, but I'm sure you can manage. We'll start by teaching you some basic phrases. As they sat down in front of the console, Dr. Valerie began to introduce them to new vocabulary and phrases in the futuristic version of English. Jake and Lily repeated each word and phrase carefully, practicing with the help of the technology that surrounded them. The future language was different, but not impossible to understand, and with Dr. Valerie's help, they quickly started to pick it up. After a few hours of intense practice, Dr. Valerie turned to them with a smile. You've done well today. Now it's time to return home. She handed them the watch, and both Jake and Lily felt a sense of anticipation. The watch began to glow once more, this time with a soft blue light. Dr. Valerie stepped back, giving them space. Remember, she said, her voice gentle but firm, you've learned more than just new words today. You've learned how to adapt to different languages and cultures. This will help you wherever you go. With one last look at the future, Jake and Lily touched the watch, and in an instant, the world around them began to twist and shimmer again. When the light faded, they found themselves back in the small cottage in Mayfield, the familiar sounds of the village outside. Lily breathed a sigh of relief. We're back, she said softly. Jake nodded, a smile spreading across his face. Yeah, we're home, but something had changed. They were no longer just teenagers trying to figure out a foreign language. They were time travelers, equipped with the knowledge and confidence to learn anything. And they knew that their adventure wasn't over. There was still so much more to explore, more languages to learn, and more stories to tell. With a glance at the watch in his hand, Jake turned to Lily. Where do we go next? Lily smiled back. I think we're ready for whatever comes our way. If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more exciting stories.